going to be background. I'll go through it. I'll tell you, what you don't need to know for a test and what you do. But some of it's just going to be background and, to explain where this stuff came from. That's not going to be on the exam. This when I start talking about utilitarianism and deontology, that's going to be the stuff you want to take notes on. So we have a nice vigorous discussion today. We'll leave early. If everyone's falling asleep, we'll stay here until 5. So the more discussion we have, the better off we're all going to be. Okay, makes sense. Alrighty then. All right, so the idea here is what we are experiencing right now is actually very strange. Throughout history, the way we live now is not something anyone experienced up until 200 or 300 years ago. Things dramatically changed. And so because you, grew up in this environment, you have no idea really what environment you're in that's shaping you, because it's just ordinary everyday stuff that goes unnoticed. And same thing with the idea of a fish can't, the fish is swimming in the water, so there's nothing but water, so it can't see anything different. So one thing I want to do is just discuss briefly the difference between what they call the ancient regime, which is the old ways of doing things, and then the modern ways of doing things that the West pioneered. Okay, so that way, at least you have an idea of like some of the things that you assume here in modern society. You'll at least be aware of what you're assuming, and then so you can actually discuss it. Okay, before the modern age, what did we have? We had, you see this pyramid here? You had a social hierarchy. The social hierarchy is based on tradition. So your religion and culture is going to justify who has authority and who doesn't, what roles they have, and how they relate to one another. So if you were a peasant in medieval England, what job prospects do you have? What job choices do you have?
Is that a peasant?
Peasant or farmer?
Also, they can produce the wheat.
Yeah. Okay, so you're born into a farming family. How many career opportunities do you have? Well, what kind of options do you have? Well, none. You're just going to do what your father did, and that's it. Or do your mother business. So the idea of a child saying, I want to be X, Y, and Z, and my choice, and all the stuff you're used to didn't exist. And so the idea here was everyone needs to do their role, and if we don't, we're dead. You have to help your family, because basically your family is scraping by, and and that's it. If the kids don't help, people are going to starve. Okay, it's a very different situation here. If you're a noble or something like that, you do have some options. You could go into the priesthood. The firstborn son inherited everything, and then the other sons went either into the military or the priesthood. Okay, so those are the options. Do you expect things to get better? Right now, do you expect anything to be different 10 years from now? What do you think? Maybe 10 years from now, can you imagine things being like some really strange things happening, kind of interesting things happening, big changes, or no change at all? Back then, there was no change. Year after year, century after century, nothing changed, basically. So the armies of Caesar and the armies of Napoleon, which is 1,000 years apart, 2,000 years apart, went at the same speed. They basically rode horses. That's it. Okay, so the idea of individual choice or things changing does not exist. Um, in addition, you have institutions back then that are intertwined. What do I mean by that? The king could actually, so if you wanted to start a business back in medieval England, what would happen? In other words, you're a peasant, you decide, well, what I want to do is I found a way of making cloth much quicker and much more efficiently. So I want to build a little workshop and start, using my techniques to produce and sell cloth. Okay, so you might think, okay, that's no problem, right? Right now, you can start any business you want. Well, back then, if the king said, "Hey, that's not in my interest," maybe they're going to burn your hut down. Maybe they're going to execute you. Maybe they're going to put you in jail. So the king is going to want, if there's any economic thing going on or a cultural thing, no, the king is not going to want art or plays or literature that actually defies the king or embarrasses the king. No freedom of speech, no freedom of expression, and no economic freedom. So the political institutions are intertwined with every other institution. And art is you just can't do a piece of art. It's got to be art that's sanctioned by the church. So you're going to have, you're not going to have, just people at the beach or something like that. You're going to have a saint or something like that. It's everything is intertwined. Now, with modernity, you have a separation of institutions. So right now, does an artist have to do religious paintings? Can an artist do something else if he or she wants to? Okay. If you wanted to start a business, do you have to ask the mayor for his permission? Do you expect the government to constantly interfere with what you're doing, and then every other mayor you come across where you're dealing business, they're going to have a different rule? Some are going to allow you to set up a shop, some are not. Some are going to allow you to set up a shop and steal all your stuff. Okay. And so you have a separation now where economic activity, people are doing economic activity without interference from any other area, let's say culture, let's say politics, and vice versa. And because of that, all these institutions become much more efficient. You can see how damaging it might be to an economy to constantly have to subscribe to the whims of political leadership or cultural leadership, like religious people, right? Every time you wanted to do something with your business, you have to worry about what they're going to think. Very inefficient. And, you probably take this for granted, but only 200 years ago, none of this existed. There was very little trade. If you decide, okay, let's say the local mayor says, okay, you can manufacture cloth. Now, how do you sell it? You put it into a cart and you send it to the next town, the next county, or whatever. And guess what? That lord over there may just steal it from you. There's no security. There's no one protecting trade. There's no fairness. There's no court if someone rips you off that you can make your money back. So it's very difficult to trade. Furthermore, most towns and most villages are self-sufficient. They're not trading for food. They're making their food. They're not trading for cloth. They're making it. Right? Did you make your clothes? No? Where did they come from? Where do you think?
People probably made them they were their soul at a store.
Okay, but where might have the clothes been made? Does anyone know where their clothes has been?
Probably like Bangladesh.
Bangladesh, China. Okay, that's a very different world. Halfway around the world, these people are making our t-shirts, and it's like nothing. How many people have starved recently, where you haven't eaten for 2 or 3 weeks? Do you know why you get ravenously hungry sometimes and like you eat too much? It's because basically in the old days, if you didn't have any fat on you, you were dead. There was constantly threats of disease, war, starvation, real threats. People died en masse. Okay, so we don't understand those circumstances. That's what I'm trying to get. I'm trying to get that across to you. Only 200 years ago, people were starving to death. Normal, ordinary people like you and I had a lot more problems than sitting in a classroom listening to a boring lecture. Okay, so one of the videos you saw was the weird stuff. I won't go over that in depth. I'm just going to briefly review it. So basically, with the emergence of the Catholic Church, making some changes, those changes broke the power of clans. So people were embedded in groups and did what the group said in the past, and in part that was founded on intermarriage. And when the church, started prohibiting cousin marriages and things like that, it weakened these extended families. Okay, so now it's really you and your nuclear family making decisions. Instead of being embedded in a clan in which you have to worry about what your uncles think, what your cousins think, and so on and so forth, you can do whatever you want. Does anybody here ask permission from your cousins if you can do something? Okay, and that's a substantial difference in how we live. Nowadays, nuclear families or individuals make decisions. How is that done? It's done through aggregation, right? What is aggregation? Voting. Aggregation is also market forces. The more supply and demand for things. So individuals making decisions through market mechanisms leads to decisions. Whereas in the old days, you have to have the person who has authority is making the decisions. Okay. Yeah, I think I went over that stuff. The important point here is in the ancient time, the authority is really based on tradition, and it's based on who is, by tradition, is allowed to make a decision. Now, virtue ethics fits in with this because if only the person with the traditional authority to make decisions is allowed to, how can you strive for a more ethical and a better decision? What you would do is make sure that person had as much virtue as possible. Remember virtue ethics? So the way to make a more virtuous or a more ethical decision is simply to have these people be better people. Modern ethics is not about being a better person. It's about anybody following the right process to making an ethical decision. Okay? It's an entirely different way of looking at it. It's about the process. If you follow that process, you're ethical. It's not whether you are ethical or not, or you are virtuous or not. Okay, it's always good to look at definitions. Individualism is independence and self-reliance. favoring individuals over the collective. So what kind of new ethics then might emerge based on this individualism? One approach has actually been informed by science. So in the past, we had Aristotle, who was sort of a proto-scientist. He made observations and he saw patterns, and he wrote down theories based on those patterns that he saw, which is an early form of science. Now we have statistics. We have very sophisticated methods. We have whole communities, universities across the world generating new information, new studies, arguing back and forth what really is going on out there. That's an entirely new level that Aristotle could never even imagine. That's the emergence of science. So what happens is the scientific method begins to get developed and people start believing in it. Why? Why do people believe in science? You know, if the scientist says X or the doctor says yeah, X, or the experts, scientific expert says X, why does anyone listen? You know, it's just a random idiot that you've never met before. Why are you listening to him?
Because they found like logical like theories, like actual how things happen, not just inventing things, but actually possible.
Okay, so they make claims about reality, how things happen, but why do you believe those claims?
This is the evidence.
Because basically it works. If you build a bridge and it falls down, what does that say about your idea? If you build a bridge and it stays up for 100 years, was that a good idea? Okay, so if you have a way of thinking that builds atomic weapons and other people have a way of thinking that are still bows and arrows, which way of thinking is more impressive? If you have a way of thinking that actually can cure disease rather than everyone dying of a new plague or something like that, are you not impressed? Right? So now we're very impressed with this thing called science. What is science? You may not be aware of this, but science is simply a consensus amongst the experts or scholars in a certain area. No scientist would claim they know the truth. They're only claiming that we who have studied this agree that that's probably the case. Okay, that's really all it is. Why, and how do people get persuaded? What scientists do is they say, okay, I think the world works this way. Here's a theory. If I run 26 miles a day, I'll perform better on the race than if I run 10 miles a day. And you test it out. That's your theory. But you always test it with evidence. Now I gather evidence. Now I observe X number of people running 26 miles versus 13 miles, let's say, and then find out whether they perform better in the marathon or not. Okay? So what you have is people proposing theories, testing them, and then you have argumentation back and forth. And then you have a consensus. Finally, people agree, yeah, there's this thing called gravity. No scientist would say, I can tell you for certain this will fall. What they're going to say is that the theory of gravity says it's highly probable this thing will fall. Why? Because we've done it 1,000 million times, observed that, and every single time it falls at the same rate. Does that mean it will fall? Can you prove to me that this will fall if I let it go? Can anyone prove to me before I let it go? Absolutely, it will definitely fall. You can't predict that. Maybe gravity suddenly changes in the next 10 seconds. Who knows? Maybe it gets modified. You can't prove that. So science is simply looking at patterns of things that have happened in the past and basically saying, well, based on that, it's probably going to happen in the future. All right? Okay. So, one of the, remember we talked about human nature. Assumptions about human nature are the basis of a lot of these philosophies. And all of them, at least in this course, suggest that human nature is best described as, the aspect of humans that is most definitive is our capacity for reason. And built right into the definition is, okay, reason gives you explanations and justification for what's going on. One way of looking at an ethic, so science is impressive because it actually changes things. I can build a better weapon, I can build a better tool, I can build a faster car. I've proved it. My idea is proven in the action. Now we all have a car that's faster, safer, and cleaner. Right? So that tells us that that theory is something to be respected, admired, believed in. Okay? So it has utility, right? The theory has utility. A scientific theory that does not change the world at all, you can't see the change, is not a scientific theory. You have to be able, and science is basically focused on understanding the world so you control and manipulate it. You can actually change the world. So, what kind of ethic does that suggest? So if you're trying to imitate science and you're trying to come up with a new ethic based on these scientific principles, what does that ethic have to be able to do? It has to have utility, which means what? It's actually got to make things better. So, the first ethical theory we're going to talk about is utilitarianism. Has anyone ever heard about that? Utilitarianism? No? It's actually probably one of the more popular ones, especially in business. Okay. So utilitarian ethics is really about the consequences. In other words, if the ethic makes people's lives better, then it's ethical. If the ethic doesn't change anything or makes things worse, then it's not ethical. Furthermore, you have to take into account how many people are involved, because different people can be harmed or helped by a certain ethic. So because people can be both harmed and helped, how do you decide whether the ethic is good or not? The ethic is doing both of those things, harming and helping. Well, what you do is you look at all of the people involved and you say, overall, how many people is it helping and how much is that ethic helping? And then how many people are hurt and how much are they hurt? And so you're looking at the quantity of people and also the magnitude, how much it really hurts them or helps them, and how many people. Okay? So if we have, let's say, 30 odd people in this class, right? And what you would do is say, well, we're going to have essay tests. Now, some of you may be good at essays. You like writing. Some of you hate that stuff. That's not your forte, and you'll advance it, so you're going to be harmed by that policy. So what you would do is probably ask everyone in this room, what's your preference and how big of a deal is it? Okay, do you want essay test or multiple choice? And then, given that choice, how much is it going to hurt you or help you? You see what I'm talking about? It's the overall quantity of people plus the weight of how much they're hurt or helped. Now, don't you do that with like already with your friends? It's like you're talking about let's do this, let's go to that restaurant or something like that. And then one person says, "Well, I got to be home by 9. We can't go to that restaurant; it's too far. My ex-girlfriend works in that restaurant. I don't want to go there." You know, what you would do with your friends is probably weigh how serious they are objecting to this thing or for this thing, and then how many people, right, are for this thing or against that thing. And you would say, well, only George is upset by this, and he's not that upset. Most people in this group are enthusiastic for this. It's not the right deal, but overall, more people are happy with this than with anything else. Make sense? It's sort of a basic mathematical calculation. See how like it's based on observation. You're observing people, and then you're doing a quantitative analysis. You're multiplying the amount of people involved by the magnitude of harm or help that will give you. Make sense? It's mathematical. Okay, one problem with this is that, you could actually do something like, let's say, there was one person in this class that's dyslexic. They really can't write at all. They will certainly fail if they write an essay. But everyone else in the class will benefit greatly by that. So a utilitarian would say, even though that one person is harmed tremendously, so many other people are helped by this form of an essay, then that's justified. I'll give you another example. Let's suppose there's there's an epidemic. Doctors are trying to keep people alive. You have one patient that's very sick, but their organs are fine. The organs could be harvested, and then there's 5 other patients who are going to die soon unless they get an organ transplant. So, what should you do ethically, according to utilitarians? What might be a permissible solution to this? You got 5 people that are going to die, or you have, unless you kill this one guy and harvest his organs.
Harvest the organs to help the other 5.
That's the utilitarian point of view. And that kind of nauseous feeling in your stomach, that's also a criticism of utilitarianism. Okay? What's the thing that makes us nauseous about that?
The fact that he didn't choose it, or like whoever is having his.
He certainly didn't choose it. He's not he's not volunteering. What else?
Like sacrifice.
Sacrificing somebody, like, it doesn't make you feel good, right? This doesn't. Even though logically you're like, yeah, this is the best thing to do, you still got this feeling in your stomach that this is wrong. There's something wrong here. Okay? And we're going to talk later on about Kant, and Kant will explain what's wrong with this. But, these things are not settled like utilitarianism and Kant and deontology and all these things are still being argued. So There's a lot of positions defending this or opposed to this. I'm just giving you the basic point of view of these things. That's all. Okay. It originally emerged as a technique to criticize traditional culture. So in England, what would happen is the lords would appoint somebody to run a town or run a business or, run a county. And they would justify their rule, their authority by tradition. Everyone knows that the lords are the ones that make decisions. They have the money, they have the power, and they decide. And so it's ethical because we believe in the tradition. Now, if you wanted to criticize that system, what would you do? What you would say is, well, instead of looking at it from a point of view of tradition, look at it from a point of view of, does it make people's lives better? And if you do that, it's a great way to criticize what's currently going on. You could say, hey, these decisions are not helping the poor. They're not helping, this group or that group. They're only helping a select few people. Right? And as soon as you go to this method, this ethic, with this ethic, you can then say, hey, all of these people are not being helped by the ethic. Okay? And these people are some of these people are being helped a little bit, but a lot of people are being harmed. And so what you would do is say, this is not a justifiable ethic because the outcomes are not all that good. Make sense? Okay, so what we're going to do is look at sure if I should do this or not. Forget how long this is. Yeah, we might as well do it now. I might also assign this for homework too.
Should Batman kill the Joker? If you were to ask the Dark Knight himself with his hard and fast no-killing rule, he'd say absolutely not. Actually, in fact, he would say, absolutely not. When you think about it, dude is pretty Kantian in his ethics. Regardless, because he refused to do what needs to be done. Or to save engines and treats intention fast no-killing rule, he'd say, should Batman kill the Joker? If you were to ask the Dark Knight himself with his hard and fast no-killing rule, he'd say absolutely not. Actually, in fact, he would say, absolutely not. When you think about it, dude is pretty Kantian in his ethics. Regardless of what Joker does, there are some lines that good people do not cross. And for Batman, killing definitely falls on the wrong side of that line. But let's be real here. Joker is never gonna stop killing. Sure, Batman will have him thrown back in Arkham, but we all know that he's gonna get out. He always gets out, and once he's free, he will kill again, and maim and terrorize. And when he does, Won't a little bit of that be Batman's fault? Batman has been in a position to kill the Joker hundreds of times. He has had the power to save anyone from ever being a victim of the Joker again. If you have the ability to stop a killer and you don't, are you morally pure because you didn't kill? Or are you morally dirty because you refused to do what needs to be done? So, why do I describe Batman as Kantian? Well, the school of thought laid out by 18th century German philosopher Immanuel Kant, now known as Kantianism, is pretty straightforward. More precisely, it's absolute. Kantianism is all about sticking to the moral rule book. There are never any exceptions or any excuses for violating moral rules. And our man Batman tries his hardest to stick to his code, no matter what. But there are other ways of looking at ethics, like instead of focusing on the intent behind our behavior, what if we paid more attention to the consequences? One moral theory that does this is utilitarianism. It focuses on the results or consequences of our actions and treats intentions as irrelevant. Good consequences equal good actions in this view. So what's a good consequence? Modern utilitarianism was founded in the 18th century by British philosophers Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, but the theory has philosophical ancestors in ancient Greek thinkers such as Epicurus. All of these guys agreed that actions should be measured in terms of the happiness or pleasure that they produce. After all, they argued, happiness is our final end. It's what we do everything else for. Think about it like this. Many things that you do for the sake of something else. You study to get a good grade, you work to get money. But why do you want good grades or money? There are different answers we could give, like maybe we're seeking affirmation for our intelligence or the approval of our parents or a degree that will give us a career that we want. But why do we want that particular career? Why do we want approval? We can keep asking these questions, but ultimately our answer will bottom out in, I want what I want because I think it will make me happy. That's what we all want. It's one of the few things everyone has in common. And utilitarians believe that's what should drive our morality. Like Kant, utilitarians agree that a moral theory should apply equally to everyone, but they thought the way to do that was to ground it in something that's really intuitive. And there's really nothing more basic than the primal desire to seek pleasure and avoid pain. So it's often said that utilitarianism is a hedonistic moral theory. This means the good is equal to the pleasant, and we ought morally to pursue pleasure and happiness and work to avoid pain. But utilitarianism is not what you'd call an egoistic theory. Egoism says that everyone ought morally to pursue their own good. In contrast to that, utilitarianism is other-regarding. It says that we should pursue pleasure or happiness not just for ourselves, but for as many sentient beings as possible. To put it formally, we should act always so as to produce the greatest good for the greatest number. This is known as the principle of utility. Okay, so no one's gonna argue with a philosophy that tells them to seek pleasure. But sometimes doing what provides the most pleasure to the most people can mean that you have to take one for the team. It can mean sacrificing your pleasure in order to produce more good overall. Like when it's your birthday and your family says you can choose any restaurant you want. The thing that would make you happiest is Thai food, but you know that that would make the rest of your family miserable. So when you choose Chinese, which is nobody's favorite but everybody can make do, then you've thought like a utilitarian. You've chosen the action that would produce the most overall happiness for the group, even though it produced less happiness for you than other alternatives would have. The problem is, for the most part, we're all our own biggest fans. We each come preloaded with a bias in favor of our own interests. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. Caring about yourself is a good way to promote survival. But where morality is concerned, utilitarians argue, as special as you are no more special than anybody else. So your interests count, but no more than anyone else's. Now, you might say you agree with that. I mean, we all like to think of ourselves as being generous and selfless. But even though I'm sure you are a totally nice person, you have to admit that things seem way more important, weightier, higher stakes, when they apply to you rather than to some stranger. So utilitarians suggest that we make our moral decisions from the position of a benevolent, disinterested spectator. Rather than thinking about what I should do, they suggest that I consider what I would think if I were advising a group of strangers about what they should do. That way, I have a disposition of goodwill, but I'm not emotionally invested, and I'm a spectator rather than a participant. This approach is far more likely to yield a fair and unbiased judgment about what's really best for the the group. Now, to see utilitarianism put to the test, let's pop over to the thought bubble for some flash philosophy. 20th century British philosopher Bernard Williams offered this thought experiment. Jim is on a botanical expedition in South America when he happens upon a group of 20 indigenous people and a group of soldiers. The whole group of indigenous people is about to be executed for protesting their oppressive regime. For some reason, the leader of the soldiers offers Jim the chance to shoot one of the prisoners, since he's a guest in their land. He says that if Jim shoots one of the prisoners, he'll let the other 19 go. But if Jim refuses, then the soldiers will shoot all 20 protesters. What should Jim do? More importantly, what would you do? Williams actually presents this case as a critique of utilitarianism. The theory clearly demands that Jim shoot one man so that 19 will be saved, but Williams argues no moral theory ought to demand the taking of an innocent life. Thinking like a Kantian, Williams argues that it's not Jim's fault that the head soldier is a total dirtbag, and Jim shouldn't have to get literal blood on his hands to try and rectify the situation. So although it sounds pretty simple, utilitarianism is a really demanding moral theory. It says we live in a world where sometimes people do terrible things, and if we're the ones who happen to be there and we can do something to make things better, we must, even if that means getting our hands dirty. And if I sit by and watch something bad happen when I could have prevented it, my hands are dirty anyway. So Jim shouldn't think about it as killing one man. That man was dead already because they were all about to be killed. Instead, Jim should think of his decision as doing what it takes to save 19. And Batman needs to kill the Joker already. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Now, if you decide you want to follow utilitarian moral theory, you have options. Specifically, two of them. When Bentham and Mill first proposed their moral theory, it was in a form now known as act utilitarianism, sometimes called classical utilitarianism. And it says that in any given situation, you should choose the action that produces the greatest good for the greatest number, period. But sometimes the act that will produce the greatest good for the greatest number can seem just wrong. For instance, suppose a surgeon has 5 patients all waiting for transplants. One needs a heart, another a lung, 2 are waiting for kidneys, and the last needs a liver. The doctor is pretty sure that these patients will all die before their names come up on the transplant list, and he just so happens to have a neighbor who has no family, total recluse, not even a very nice guy. The doctor knows that no one would miss the guy if he were to disappear, and by some miracle, the neighbor is a match for all 5 of the transplant patients. So it seems like, even though this would be a bad day for the neighbor, an act utilitarian should kill the neighbor and give his organs to the 5 patients. It's the greatest good for the greatest number. Yes, 1 innocent person dies, but 5 innocent people are saved. This might seem harsh, but remember that pain is pain regardless of who's experiencing it. So the death of the neighbor would be no worse than the death of any of those patients dying on the transplant list. In fact, it's 5 times less bad than all 5 of their deaths. So thought experiments like this one led some utilitarians to come up with another framework for their theory. This one is called rule utilitarianism. This version of the theory says that we ought to live by rules that, in general, are likely to lead to the greatest good for the greatest number. So yes, there are going to be situations where killing an innocent person will lead to the greatest good for the greatest number. But rule utilitarians want us to think long-term and on a larger scale. And overall, a whole society where innocent people are taken off the streets to be harvested for their organs is going to have a lot less utility than one where you don't have to live in constant fear of that happening to you. So rule utilitarianism allows us to refrain from acts that might maximize utility in the short run and instead follow rules that will maximize utility for the majority of the time. As an owner of human organs, this approach might make sense to you. But I still gotta say, if Batman were a utilitarian of either kind, it wouldn't look very good for the Joker. Today we learned about utilitarianism. We studied the principle of utility and learned about the difference between act and rule utilitarianism. Next time, we'll take a look at another moral theory, contractarianism. Crash Course Philosophy is produced in association with PBS Digital Studios. You can head over to
Alrighty, on Crash Course. Okay, so we need to do, we're going to get into new groups, and then we're going to actually try some of this stuff. Okay, so go ahead to Canvas and find out what your new group number is. There should be a second group now for this class. And then you're going to sit in new places. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 in the middle, 5, 6, 7. Find out what group number you are. And we're going to move to those groups, introduce yourselves. What's your favorite color? Show pictures of your pet.
It's okay. Are we? It's 1, 2, 3.
You're two.
Five. Second row.
Warrior right there.
Oh, right there.
No, wait. He's what?
This should be 1, 2, 3, 4 in the middle someplace. 5, 6, 7.
Isn't it? I think it's the bomb. Add to watch it. Guess.
There's no one thing.
Yeah, exactly. Was like an obvious answer.
5 is going to be right there.
One.
You're 5?
I was one. Yeah, it's really good question.
Over here, no. Oh, we can find out on my end.
So,
Where's 2?
you know, so-
Okay, so what's your first and last name? There you go. Always go. Second row. Wait. Okay. Introduce yourselves. What's your favorite color? And why is that your favorite color?
We got to all these. Just go back to where we were.
Okay, so we're going to go to Canvas, and there's actually a link to utilitarianism. And what it's going to say here is that you want to copy this spreadsheet, right-click here, and then duplicate, and then your group is going to work on the solution here. The first thing is going to be, first analysis is act utilitarianism. And I give you step by step how to go through that. And this is rule utilitarianism. So the idea with act utilitarianism is, as any scientist knows, you have to decide, okay, how can I measure something? First thing you have to decide is, what's my criterion for evaluating what's good or what's harmful? Okay, so different people might have different ideas of what's good and what's harmful. So it could be things like, okay, are you happy or sad? Right? Are you experiencing pleasure or pain? Are you healthy or sick? There's lots of ways you could decide, but the first thing you have to do is decide, okay, what is the criterion for evaluating what's helpful for people and what's harmful? And then the second thing you need to do is how you measure that. So for example, if I said, well, my criterion is satisfaction or being unsatisfied. How do you measure that? Any ideas? In other words, once you have the concept, then you have to actually be a scientist and start figuring out, well, how can I measure that? What actually indicates happiness or sadness? Okay, you could actually analyze levels of dopamine and serotonin in the body with a blood test. Or you could actually do a survey and ask people, how do you feel about it today? How do you feel about this? How strongly do you feel about this? Right? So the first thing is, what is the criterion? The second thing is, how are you going to measure it? And then the third thing is, how many people are impacted? Over here is how much pleasure or pain. You can think about the worst thing would be a negative 100%. The best thing is a positive 100%. If it's in the middle, it might be 50% or minus 50%. See that? So it's quantity. You're going to decide how many people are impacted, and then how much that group is going to be impacted, and then this is going to automatically calculate. Over here, I want you to just decide what's the benefit or harm, and why, what weight are you giving, and why. And then rule utilitarianism is a little bit different. Who are the stakeholders? How important is that stakeholder to the company's decision? How harmful or helpful to that stakeholder, is that thing? And then finally, the points we'll calculate over here. Okay, so just try and do both of them. Work your way through both of them. See if you can come up with an overall answer to the question of, should the policy for this class be that we allow anyone to skip class without penalty? Okay, so you're actually going through a utilitarian process of figuring out what is the most good versus the most harm. Make sense? So go ahead and work. Everyone should be able to see the same thing and work on the same thing, and see if you can figure this out and fill this out, and then we'll go over it. If you have any questions, let me know.
So what is well? So it's the should see this as well. Or to the period on.
That's just right there.
Right.
Yeah.
So she's
It should be a class, and that's part of their student. They're able to figure out a reason why. Yeah, still since so we can say yes because I want to see next week. Is that a good both buildings? What you do unhealthy. Unhealthy because there was anything.
Yeah, we got
What the key was your what was your
should the positive is kind of be
do we have to literally make a survey and then just give it to
that's not
people?
no that's
So then how do we get numbers?
You have to make them up.
You need a.
Oh, we literally make.
Yeah.
I'm cool with that.
In this yellow area, you want, okay, what is your definition? Is it pleasure, pain? Is it health, unhealth?
We did unhealth.
Okay, and then this one is how you're gonna measure that, and then you're actually just making stuff up down here. How many people are impacted? Just make something up. How much are they impacted? What's the percentage? Minus 100 to 100. You're just making that up, and this will automatically calculate. And over here, you're saying, okay, what is the benefit and harm? Why are you putting that weight on there? So you're explaining yourself there.
So when you mean weight, you mean the weight the people in each category carry for the.
Well, this would be like, okay, well, let's say 20 people are for the change.
Yeah.
And those 20 people, approximately, they are interested in change, but not too much. So it's really a 50% impact.
Okay.
So it's not the most beneficial, but it's somewhat beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
Or minus 50, it's going to harm them, not the worst harm in the world, but substantial. The worst harm in the world would be 100%. The best in the world would just be, I think, 40.
Wait, so it's basically saying like they're for the change, but the change may hurt them, is what the percentage means?
Percentage will be, if it's a positive percentage, that means that thing will give them the most benefit possible.
Okay.
Minus 100, that thing will harm them the most out of everything. So you're adding a mathematical weight
So
to how much damage or help it's going to do.
okay.
So you gotta. Let's just say, yeah, so. How many cameras do? No, we first get to the. It's too like. That's your phone. Probably. Yeah.
25 people are for this change.
Question for how many people are impacted? Is it just we're just making up that number? And should it be even or
It should be 20. No, we want to make it. That's a 30 close.
I want to make a certain awesome.
That's no, we just want
Students get quality.
So,
Students. Zero.
and then I'd say, I think 10 people against one. No, I just think it's just.
How would this impact them? Alright, we're at 22. That's what I'm saying. What's the measure mean again? In the yellow? Is that just the total amount of people?
No, the measure would be, what are you using, a survey? Are you taking blood samples? Yeah.
No, and then first two comes up to 30. We could do like one.
Yeah. Like, let me see it. Number one. Was it one?
Benefit.
Sure. Instead of like, it just looks like no, I never get 6 times.
And it was like,
Oh, Google.
so that means and then this alright, so what do we do instead? It's mostly the bottom. This doesn't make sense. Oh, what's the, okay, so the benefit is like, if there is, if they don't get everything else, they can't have in case. And the weight is like. Yeah, they're missing on the, but it's better than. Yeah, it's not like. Oh, so the points of stuff, they would just like, miss class, or like students. Okay. For all just like, line graph. Where already put the benefit? Oh, yeah. You don't like you guys won't be. No, it's percentage. Do you have to? Maybe percentage. Like benefit. Missing out. Yeah. Good word. Or future use all positive. I'm right. Yes, no, I was just doing my first soul.
They want to change it because they're putting people's kids now on iPhone every day.
Don't have a priority, but skipping. So, but it's just what they harm for all. I think it was just like if they just like they should have first band and the first one you would say what? So you gotta yeah, I don't think you have to stay both, but so I guess farm learning is like I guess students that like you know sit down or something. Not fair, which I what are we doing? Yeah, one of the one of the bears would be it's the most confusing. Maybe. Tenants just don't start. So yeah. A lot of people who are they're like yeah they don't know. Or like
Allowed to skip it. So I know it's
or they have the bonus. They always give them maybe they don't care. So yeah, they don't care as long as they don't care, but they like the option. But beautiful.
Yeah, but that's like the whole point of the tenants. They can skip the class because they get the bus. The only penalty is skipping the class.
None of the weekends. I mean, you see the way it's like. Yeah, we're missing. Because the possible is yeah, well,
People.
no, we gotta fill that, oh, like the reps. I think it's just about.
But it has to be out of 100 people. It's 175.
No, it's all students relative to people, so it's inserted within. Right. You can do that. We could, yeah, probably, I know it's the first one is the second one. Yeah. So.
Okay, so signal is the age.
Teachers. No, you can do.
All right, does anybody need more? See any work here for group one, so let's go to group two. What is tell us about your solution.
Wait, so our solution was that. How should I go about it? Like,
Well, right now you have 50 people impacted and 0. I guess that makes it easier for you, but you really should have some students in these other categories.
well, we just thought that it didn't affect them because it was more like an independent choice. So if they didn't choose to skip, then it wouldn't affect them. You know what I mean? Like the policy wouldn't affect them.
How do you put it?
Okay. I guess you could make that argument. How about the how do you explain the rule utilitarianism here? Here's the overall points. You're not adding up to 100, which you need to add up to 100. And then you have 100% weight, 100% positive weight for these students here. For students, impacts professors, minus 70, impacts university, minus 100. What's your explanation for those weights?
For the 100%, it's like the same thing. It kind of just lets kids skip class without any punishment. For the for the professors. Wait, you're asking what's the overall weight, like the importance? You're asking for that.
Yeah.
Section? For that section, students we said is 50, like because I feel like it would affect the students the most. Professors is 30 because like they're the second most important in this situation, and we just did university 20.
Okay, and the third is the least. They're least affected by that. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you have 100%, minus 70, and then 100%. How do you explain those?
So the 100% is like I said, same thing as above. It really doesn't.
So there's no
really
downside. No
negative.
downside.
What?
So there's no downside for students, only
No,
the
it
upside.
doesn't negatively
Okay.
at all.
And so why minus 70 for professors?
We were gonna do minus 100, but we chose minus 70 because I guess it doesn't really affect them. But at the same time, if everyone's allowed to skip class without penalty, what goes to say that everyone's not gonna, and then this professor's left with a class full of no.
Okay.
And then for the 20%, we just said it's because pretty much it's just encouraging students to skip class without penalty. So
Okay, but why would that be a harm to the university?
because then you have kids just not going to class, and kids not going to class would result in worse grades, and
Okay, so they're not going to learn that.
it would drop the average.
Okay. Which would also be probably some professors actually care if students learn, so that can also be an explanation for that
Yeah.
one there. Okay, group 4, where are you? Go explain your. How many people are impacted? That's the wrong figures there. You should these should really be whole numbers. So it should be 50, 30. 50, 30, 20, is that it? Okay. It's a lot of students. So why are we saying 80% positive impact for students that are for the policy? Why are we saying that?
We said that because it helps the students feel less stressed and gives them more freedom. But it
Okay.
also makes it harder for teachers. It also makes it harder for teachers to keep students involved and keep the schools like high standard.
Yeah, but we're talking here just about the students. Students against the policy, how does it harm them?
Yeah, it helps them feel stressed, like feel less stressed, like less academic.
Well, that's a positive thing, though. That's up here. Students against the policy, why do you have negative 40%? What harm could that be causing them?
Their grades can different. Like even though their grades aren't being affected by the attendance itself, the grades can still be affected by the knowledge that they're not getting.
Well, also, if you show up for class and there's very few people there, you can't be interacting with your colleagues. You can't, participate in discussion, and people are randomly showing up or not showing up. You build no community in the classroom. So there could be a lot of negatives. And then students that are not certain. You're saying, okay, it's a positive 20%. I'm not sure why you would do that, but. Okay. Now this is the rule utilitarianism. So basically, you have students, professors, academic standards, university, I guess, and you have looks like the same. So you're saying that the students are most important stakeholder here, right? And then second, professors, third, university, and then you're saying it's not 100% beneficial to students, but it's 60%. So what's your explanation? Not sure?
We haven't quite inquired about that yet.
Okay. Let's go to group 5. Group 5, do you have, what's your plan here? You have how many people? Why are we weighing these students for change? Why is it 75%? Where are we? Group 5, go.
Well, we just said like it could be beneficial because if we're talking about like unhealthy or healthy, then the big difference is just like mental health, which is like a major part of schooling today and kind of like the whole world today. So if they had this could help them. And the
Okay.
only reason we didn't make it 100 was because like with the 25%, it could negatively impact their mental health because they may gain stress from not going to class. And then
Okay.
assignments stack up, tests stack up, and then they kind of just
And
fail.
plus, some students should come to class, but they don't because they don't want to, and they really should be sitting in class because that's the best way for them to learn. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then students against the policy minus 75%. What's the harm?
Basically just like kind of the same thing, but like the opposite. Not gonna lie.
Okay, and the students that are uncertain, 20% positive. Okay, let's go to now. You're saying here that students are the most important, so you're giving them 50 points, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have these are evenly distributed. Now, why are we saying minus 15% for teachers? So it's slightly harmful.
Because it could like if people don't show up to class, one, it looks bad on the professor because then they don't have anything to go off of when they get evaluated as a professor. So they would lose something. So they could like I don't think they'd get out of a job, and you would know because you're a professor. But like I don't know how that works.
Well, if my students didn't show up for class, I'd be fired.
Okay.
But I mean, theoretically, I can establish a policy that says you don't have to show up for class. I've never tried that, so I'm not sure if I'll get in trouble or not. Some universities I taught at in the past, they've actually had a policy that if you miss more than 2 classes, you have automatic failure, and that was a university policy.
But thank you.
So. All right, so the university is apparently not impacted at all, and then the students are negatively impacted.
Yeah, because the university, like, let's be real here, they don't really need anything but the money from students, and they're still getting the money.
Well, suppose the students start graduating not having learned anything. What happens to the reputation of the university?
Oh, they're not doing it.
And what if the students are not passing their classes because they're not attending, and so you now have students that are graduating 5, 6, 7 years instead of 4? Is the university happy about that? No. So there could be a lot of reasons for that. Okay, group 6. Does anyone want to explain your weights to us?
We should get silver maximum.
Where's group 6?
So we said that students for change. We said that it would have benefited them 70% because they wouldn't have to. They wouldn't have to like be stressed about showing up to class. They could like just learn the material on their own time, but it could also, we didn't put 100% because it could also negatively affect them, because if they're not in class, they may not learn everything.
That's interesting because you put pleasure, pain up here, but then down here you're talking about stress. So really, maybe up here you should have something like something like that might be a better util.
Yeah, thank you.
And then you would measure that by a survey or taking their blood or whatever you want. Okay, let's talk about this. So we have students, professors, and parents. Okay, we have something new here. Parents. Parents don't care apparently.
Well, really, it was just based on the fact that, you know, as a whole, they're not really affected because they're not studying and they're not the professors and there's universities.
And they could be paying for it. They could be paying for it, and they could be enduring your staying in their house for a longer period of time than they want because. Okay, why minus 30 for professors? What's the harm?
It could affect their the attendance, and the university has something to say about that.
Okay. And students, or why isn't it not 100% beneficial for students? What's the downside? So it's overall it's 80%, but you're still not saying 100%.
We said that because 80% because they have their classes uploaded, so they can still essentially learn and they still can get good grades. However, it's not 100% because, as you said, sometimes some people learn better in a classroom, so they still might lose that element of being fully educated.
Okay. Group 7. We have unhealthy. I guess healthy, unhealthy is going to be their criterion. So why don't you walk us through your weights? Where are we? Group 7 is where?
We said like 50%, half and half, because sometimes when they call out, they can't go to class. It's out of their control, like family emergencies or something like that. But on the other hand, they realize that it doesn't count to miss class for an emergency. Like they just don't feel the need to go into class.
So how does that benefit them? So it benefits them because they're able to do what they feel like doing?
They have not. That's why it's mixed. Still mixed.
Okay. What's the downside then? So they're able to come to class when they want to and not when they don't want to. That's positive, but what's the negative?
Right. The grades would be affected.
Okay, their grades will go down. Okay.
They won't. Sometimes maybe if it's in the class, they won't have that socializing skill.
Right.
Like the debates and all that.
And students against the policy, why would this policy harm them?
Because sometimes people might just take advantage of not coming to class.
And students uncertain. Okay. So let's go to why are students the most important here? And why is the harm? Why is it somewhat harmful? So you're saying students are the most important, right?
Yeah.
Why is it harmful?
Because they're the ones that are controlling the decisions. Like they're the ones given this freedom, and they might abuse it.
Okay, so basically, they'll be self-destructive in a sense.
So yeah.
So everyone's losing here. Professors are losing, and the university's losing. So how do professors lose?
Because no one's going to the classes, then they won't be able to teach.
Yeah, they can't convey things, or do activities, do debates. They can't do all that's out the window. How does the university get harmed?
The reputation gets ruined.
Okay, yeah. So you have students graduating and don't know anything, and eventually people are going to not want an MSU degree. Okay. just for laughs, go ahead and go to, there should be a survey posted. I don't see it here. What did I do with it?
Excuse me. Oh, we fixed our mistake on our slide and we added.
Oh, okay. So you're
We did it on.
Yeah, we made a copy of the work.
Instead of putting it.
so is this it?
Yeah.
Okay. Talk to us about your weights here. 90% good for students. Why?
We chose 90% because it allows them to like choose the importance of like the time they like. For example, if they needed an emergency or they're feeling not good or the mental state is down, they could choose not to go.
Okay, but why not 100%?
We chose not 100% because although they had the freedom to do that and they could, it reflects their grade. They can miss like valuable information, which can replace their grade later on.
Okay. And apparently it harms students, but not 100%, only 30%. What's going on there?
Although like you have a percentage that you can probably pass by not missing, like getting your own information from somewhere else. Although it's not like beneficial. Like it's not what you should do.
And the uncertain students, it'll benefit the uncertain students?
We just put it at 40 as like those are the people that don't necessarily get affected by either going or not going. Those are the people who are on top of the test, always on the work.
Okay. And so you're saying here the board of what? The university?
Yeah. It's technically a university.
Does the university have a board? I don't know. They probably have a board, right?
Yeah.
Okay. They let's assume they have a board. Okay, so they're the most important. And you're saying it's minus 100%. So that's the worst possible scenario. So why?
Because overall, if more people start doing it, missing out class, more people want to not go to class, which can reflect the institution and can negatively affects the success of graduation.
Okay, so it's going to undermine graduation. It may undermine the reputation, and and then we're harming the professors. How are we harming professors?
We chose 50% because although they shouldn't care, they should care if their students are growing or not. It's not a positively effect. They still can lose their job, like you said, but they'll still get paid.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully, at least you have some sense of how utilitarian thinking would work. I thought I had a thing to vote over here. Oh, here it is. Utilitarianism, Google Sheet, vote for best group. Open this up, and you're going to vote for the best group. Just look at the groups. Don't vote for your own. And when you're finished, you can take off.
What do we get?
Are these like new groups going forward?
Yeah. Yeah, from now on, you're coming into class, sit in your groups.
No, not even.
Oh yeah, well, next week.